another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. I'm your host, Jana Axline. Today, I'm joined by Andrew Cohen. He is the founder, CEO, and managing partner of Evoke. Andrew's professional background includes several entrepreneurial endeavors, including working as a consultant for several large advertising agencies in New York City, as well as his first company, Covey Studios, which laid the groundwork for the creation of Evoke in 2005. As an early pioneer of rich media with Covey Studios, Andrew's professional background includes over 20 years of work in digital design and user experience, providing expertise to global brands, including Bay Systems, Bank of America, Merck, Novartis, Nordisk, and Reynolds America. Andrew's background in creative design, along with his understanding of technology, allows him to drive Evoke to create unique and cutting-edge digital enterprise solutions. As CEO and managing partner, Andrew leads Evoke Enterprise Technology Group and has a large focus on business development. He's a SharePoint subject matter expert and has participated in the Microsoft Developer Kitchen for SharePoint 2013. In 2014, Andrew led Evoke's global expansion with the creation of its sister company, Evoke Systems, and opened offices in Minsk, Belarus. In addition to his professional credentials, Andrew earned his BA in Studio Arts from the University of North Carolina, where he also was a 4-year varsity soccer player. Prior to attending UNC, Andrew played professional soccer in Brazil for Sao Paulo. As an avid soccer fan and player, Andrew can be found watching or playing soccer when not in the office, as well as spending time with his family. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Jana. It's a lot to get out of.
It's an impressive and exciting background. Well, I'm excited for today's conversation because, Andrew, you're an expert in automation, and we hear about automation all the time. Now, right? It's becoming a buzzword. So let's start with, what does automation really mean to a company?
Well, that's a very good point to start in on. You know, there's different products out there that handle automation, but we look at it as understanding what the current business state is, what the business problems are, and if there's a manual problem in terms of manual issue or redundant tasks that could be identified and isolated and be handled by a computer or machine, why not try and apply that kind of technology there? So the real first thing we do is understand what the potential problem is, what will be alleviated by implementing a robotic automation solution, which is what we call RPA. And there's different tool sets out there. There's products like UiPath or Power Automate that we work with. And then we try to work with the client's existing technology stack to try to see what we implement the best solution where they can leverage their current licenses. So once we understand the current state versus future state, we can pretty much identify an automation effort that's going to show a really good return on investment, as well as time savings for the organization, as well as moving people to more profitable areas of the enterprise.
And so where do you see a lot of companies putting focus in around automation? Like, are there certain departments that tend to fare better automating processes?
It's pretty much every business unit has their own kind of manual processes that they try to look at and how to identify. Areas we see, obviously in HR, with HR onboarding is a big one. There's a lot of needs. So how do we get our new employees hired, increase the efficiency of those swim lanes where there were a lot of manual bottlenecks can be alleviated by letting a bot or some type of automation workflow push things along a little quicker. So something that might have taken 3 to 4 weeks to get completed to get a new employee onboarded can be done within days. So that's one area. I mean, pretty much every, like I said, business unit has opportunities to look at ways to understand and implement an automation strategy, where it might be part of an overall data strategy of a company where there's multiple disparate data bases and systems they're trying to aggregate into a unified interface. Well, we can sync all those up and use automation to bring all that together. So instead of having to go through multiple different areas and multiple different fields, you can actually have everything aggregated into one common interface and use an automation to bring that together.
And so can you give us an example of like a great success story that you've had in automation?
Yeah, absolutely. We're working on so many different ones right now. Probably the ones that are most successful in terms of pretty massive impact are dealing a lot with some of our clients that are connecting to like third-party systems, where there's what they have like most of these big products that we connect to have a thing called an API, which allows us to connect server to server type of communication. So what we're finding a lot of success is there's applications out there in certain different verticals in terms of like the accounting advisory space, for example, where there's an existing system they're working with for doing all their tax preparation and things of that nature. Well, it's a very cumbersome solution that you have to go through multiple different tables and pages to find the information you want. By connecting the systems and automating the fields that they need to bring through for what they're doing from auditing purposes or other types of tax preparation purposes, we can streamline that process, which used to be thousands of man hours, down to minutes. So we're able to create that automation workflow, connect the systems, and then bring it to wherever they want that data to live, whether it's in SharePoint, Excel, or even to a Power BI type of dashboard for visualization across the company.
And so, while it may seem obvious to me and to you, but why would a company want to automate? And what happens when they do? What happens to the hours that they spent on those processes? What do you see them doing?
Well, yeah, there's different reasons why they're doing it. I mean, certain ones are just they're looking for an inefficiency to create that workflow to get rid of a wasted time and effort. So that hours waste is something that's a concern. Also, in other areas of redundant workforce. So unfortunately, sometimes these automation solutions can move into a reduction of workforce because there's people that are just doing like punching a task that can be done by a computer, just by teaching the machine how to do it. It changes depending on the need. I think it's something that why they do it, about where the things are trending now is about end customer experience too. Mm-hmm. So this is a big trend that it's probably become the number one digital trend for mid-market companies, where it used to be some other areas that were more focused on maybe savings of time reduction, savings, increasing performance across the company. Now it's about the customer experience. So what that means in terms of a mid-market to enterprise company, customer experience is in that data journey, that user journey through their whole product suite and interaction with that customer. So if they can create efficiencies by digitally transforming areas of the business to create better, communication to their end client, better showing of the data, and a more real-time effect to their clients, that's where automation comes in. So they can sync up all their systems and get a lot more real-time access to the information for their end clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the challenges with automation is that people don't understand the art of the possible, I guess. So,
Right.
how does an organization even know that, oh my goodness, I have these processes and they're actually inefficient and there are ways to improve this? Like, how should they reflect on that and do like business process analysis maybe?
Right. Well, I actually just had a great lunch meeting with this exact topic. It's someone we've been talking to for a while. They're in the insurance space, but they really wanted to understand the current process that they were looking to automate. So it really starts the discussion. We kind of look through it, how it's done currently. How you look it up from Visio diagram or just diagram it is. Where does the manual inputs happen on this type of workflow? And if you can see opportunities to automate, that's where we first say, okay, we can easily create like a Power Automate or UiPath solution here. Now, on top of that, which become the trend for this solution I was just talking about with this client, we're looking also tapping into machine learning and AI for part of the process, because it's one thing to automate the workflows. It's another thing to automate the processing of all this information, this data. So the data inputs they're trying to do and move it from one type of form into like a collective form or a collective environment is critical for them. So they realize they're wasting high paid employee resources to do basic data entry. And that's just maybe from one document to the next. So once we teach the computers and machine learning and AI, we feed it the documents with the kind of the templates that they come in at. It can quickly learn, ascertain what is needed, and pull that information over real time. So you're not having a resource doing it. You just do like a sanity check instead of actually having to dig in. It's wasting hours of manpower typing into Excel. It can all be moved automatically for you.
Hmm. So let's say I've decided, yes, I need to automate some processes. We're inefficient. What are the things that are going to set me up for success? What do I need to make sure that I'm doing when I go to kick off a
Yeah,
project like this?
I think it starts with overall buy-in, in terms of like, obviously whoever we talk to in the leadership position at a company, that kind of digital transformation has to be not just a change that they want, it has to be a cultural change to the company that they're going to expect and communicate it effectively. If you don't do it, there's going to be a lot of opportunities that this digital transformation will fail because there's just not buy-in collectively, because you're changing how the company performs and the process is improvement. Also, if it is not about employee reduction, which is our favorite definition state, we prefer that. You have to understand why it's a benefit to the business. And I think it goes back to the earlier question, those time savings, those hours that were now recaptured, how can they best utilize that, of course, across the company? So that value add they can bring back to the company is an overall benefit, because now for certain companies we speak to, the waste that they're doing from a manual process can now be moved to go after new client acquisition. So that they have their top resources could be doing other things to help improve the business's bottom line. So yeah, it really becomes setting up for success is really do that first audit and assessment of what you're currently doing. Understand where those kind of redundant processes might exist. What's the impact in terms of when you actually go through this and create this new state, what it will do. And these are numbers that only the company has. It's like we have 10 employees doing this one task and it costs per cost per employee, and here's the amount of waste per year we waste on that. So that's a quick equation. Not that every hour is worth $1. We understand that because employees have salaries and they're not all like that. Waste might already be factored into just the way the company does business. But the bigger the opportunity to show where that savings can be now moved to somewhere else in the business makes it a lot more easier for a company to say we should automate these processes. So yeah, it comes really just a good research and assessment of what you're currently having before you even start implementing.
And it sounds like you probably need to have a good change management strategy then as well, since it is impacting the way that people do their jobs, and it may be even impacting the number of jobs that are in that department. That, like you said, those funds may shift somewhere else within the company. So what are kind of like, here within Project Genetics, we do a lot of change management, but what are some of the great change management things you've seen then in these projects that have made it successful?
Well, one of the big things when you start looking at digital transformation from an overall change in terms of the business is a big IT reduction costs. Because once we get them migrated to the cloud, that's a big change in terms of IT perspective. How much support costs they were having to do to maintain and keep their environments up, whether they co-located or had their own environments they were hosting at. By moving things to the cloud, they're saving, depending on the size of the company, hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars dollars just by the way they do it. Now, moving things from one thing to the next to the cloud is not an easy process. There's lift and shift of current applications. There's things you have to rebuild. There's a big cost to doing that. Once you're there and you get all that settled, that's where you start seeing the cost benefit in terms of the change of the organization. And it allows you to really kind of identify what needs to change. Another thing that happens as well is consolidation of the technology stack. Most of these companies we work with, the larger ones especially, they might have redundant systems that do the same thing, and some people are using, some people are not, and they're paying huge license fees every year. So by looking at areas where you can now leverage the ecosystem of maybe one platform or a couple of platforms, you can reduce waste and cost there. So IT reduction in cost is a big one. And then obviously the employee improvement, employee engagement by allowing these new tool sets to help them drive the change across the organization.
So what would you say then are the biggest causes of failure within an automation project, whether it doesn't finish because maybe they're, for whatever reason? I'll let you say what those reasons are.
No, that's good. That's good.
You don't realize the benefits you were expecting, right? It came short of your benefits realization. So what are some drivers there?
Well, that's a very good question. And it really is, comes down to a few different key areas. One is it never was a digital transformation project to start with. It was more just a process improvement maybe. And so when you look at digital transformation and where automation comes into it, it's kind of an overall strategy you're looking at. And the companies we speak to now, they're looking at that overall strategy plan of what it means organizationally. Because you can isolate one thing and it might just automate and improve a process. It might be all you need to do depending on the size of the company, but it's not the full transformation of the organization. Other areas that happens is start and stop. I'm sure you've had this happen in your life, Jana. Projects start, budgets shift or something, or priorities change, and they don't go forward. And that really is the killer for something like this, because momentum becomes inertia, and then the startup takes so much time to get going again. So also other factors that are outside of our control, such as the pandemic, that's obviously one when you're in any kind of project, it could cause it to shift gears or halt. But yeah, I think it's about, if the company doesn't buy into it, if leadership is not behind it, big ones that happen, and budget pitfalls, not really planning accordingly, because as you start doing this, some of these projects can scale pretty significantly depending on how big the company is. So it's really about planning and planning again.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
I know in your background, I'm sure it's like you've seen it, done it hundreds of times.
So thinking about that, then you mentioned digital transformation. I'd be curious your thoughts around. There's obviously two ways to approach any sort of change, and that's you incrementally change until you get to a point that you're happy, or you create a large, encompassing strategy, and you chunk it up and you deliver it. When is incremental change appropriate versus no, we need to look at the whole strategy and approach this holistically?
We kind of take it in different approaches. We like to see if we can migrate companies to the cloud first. They move them to, let's say, Microsoft 365. Once they're there, that's the now what phenomena happens, where they can start doing these automation, and the incremental is just part of the overall strategy, because you've already migrated them to cloud. Then you can start really identifying, and basically we stand ourselves up as their automation partner, where we just kind of put a roadmap together. We isolate their incremental changes, but it's towards an overall full-blown strategy. So that's a company that's already went for that full, or whether we help them migrate or they did it themselves and we come in, that's where we look at the areas that we can identify and go back to that assessment of how they're currently doing things. And really, a lot of these kind of work streams that get improved are incremental. If you think about it, they just pull up into an amalgam of a large overall effort, as long as you keep doing it. We have other clients that are not in any plans to migrate or even move into the more recent versions of Microsoft 365. But we can still offer Power Automate to them in those kind of scenarios, where we can look at it, isolate something that is more incremental, because they might have a current state where they just want to get something out of email, like documents, and move it into SharePoint, for example. Well, you can automate that very easily and almost with no code expertise. So it's opportunities. We look at how we work. It doesn't have to be the overall large strategy. We can help companies at the small level, where they're just looking to maybe improve a process that might have a big impact. Obviously, the preference is to look at the full picture, but it is kind of customized a little bit in terms of that experience, because every company is different in where they are in that journey.
So let's talk about, we've talked about a lot about companies. Let's talk about the individual. Let's say me as a person can't undertake a whole automation project or hire somebody, because I'm just an individual contributor. Sure. But there are a lot of, like you said, really cool tools out there that you might be able to leverage. So what are some of those tools that I could, use to improve my day-to-day job?
No, that's great. I just did a workshop, I think it was last week. And part of the workshop, I knew the audience was, even I did like a self-assessment form that I created prior to the workshop, that I knew there was going to be people that are like of armies of one, and maybe people, companies of 500 plus. I wasn't sure who the audience was. I didn't have any idea. But I knew a couple people that might be attending, and I knew they were more like a small shop. So I wanted to make sure that what we presented on the workshop was meaningful to anyone who's there. So what we did is we went through kind of the overall picture, what this means, how you workshop ideas to have a transformation in automation areas. But then we also did some tips and tricks of like what the current thing is. If they're on Microsoft 365, we have a lot of expertise in, so that's why I go that route. But there's other tools out there. And I'm not a Microsoft salesman or anything. It's just, we happen to have really strong, Microsoft background. But it allows you to take advantage of the platform. It exists right out of the box. We use that expression a lot, out of the box. And if you're in Teams or, you're inside of Outlook or wherever, there's all these kind of tools and tricks you can quickly drop in that you don't need any coding experience. So it might be using Microsoft Planner, for example, where I can create my better project management, even as an individual. I do it personally to make sure I have accountability, and I can see it, visualize the tasks. There's a dashboard attached to it. I don't have any technology skills to be applied here. It's just drag and drop, and you can just have at it. And these exist right out of the gate. So what we try to show is it's very attainable for even an individual. It doesn't have to be a company with an IT department or bring in expertise or outside consultants like us. It's just, here it is, we showed it to them, and we train people on this as well. It's just something that, these are great things that exist that, I'll say this, even some of the big clients who work in the enterprise, they probably use 3% of their technology stack. They don't even know what it does. And that's the big, comes with thousands of IT employees. It's just that, just like here's our office suite, we run with it. And what we like to see is, try and help people understand what they have and really leverage that investment, because licenses, even if they're cheap per month per user, they still cost money. And can you get the most maximum spend out of it?
Yeah, I one time went into my O365 account and went and looked at every single app that was there.
Right.
The Flow and some of these other ones. And I think part of a challenge for me is like really imagining how I could leverage that,
Yeah, it's a good point. Because if you look in that application in Office 365 and the little button, they keep adding things too. But I think what you want to look at is you get a lot of things out of the box that anyone with just a basic quick training, and this stuff's available online too. I mean, you can go online and find videos on how to do everything. But in terms of if you want to get tuned up really quickly with it more precise, you could turn on Teams, create a quick SharePoint online site, add in things like Microsoft Forms for your own collection if you're sending something out to a client for collecting of information. You could implement Planner. You could create all your projects into groups and channels within Teams. These are things you can do with just clicking buttons. And then the SharePoint world is just really becomes your one-stop shop for your communication site. And so it all integrates. What I really like about the Microsoft world is just that ecosystem. Everything syncs really well together. And we take it to another level because, for ourselves and our clients, but it's also really, great for anyone who has it. Just, you can, like you're saying, click around. You can just try it. What does this do? You're not going to break anything, probably. Try Streamout too. It's like the video things, like their YouTube channels.
Yes.
Powerful. Yeah. And this is all available, with probably just like normal basic license or S3, I think. So.
Yeah, I can't wait, just like my own side point, until they more fully integrate Planner and Project. I would love to be able to plan my project in Project and then assign the task to the team member, go to Planner, and when they update it in Planner, it comes back to my project. I would love that. I know there's people who've built that automation, but Microsoft needs to do that.
Well, Microsoft gives you the platform. They give you Project Online. They give you Planner.
Right.
What we're doing, actually, one of our clients is actually for the Greek government. It's a fund that works for the Greek government to sell off assets. We're building a whole project management tool completely based on the Microsoft ecosystem. So exactly what you're asking for. Absolutely. It's that. We're using all the systems and connecting them without having to really. It's most configuration. Hardly, there's some low code, but nothing too crazy. So really, what you're asking for, we're building it. And it'll all be built within the Microsoft platform, and it's going to be something we can do within 2 months instead of like 6 to 10 months, which if you're building like a custom application from scratch. So yeah, the idea is what you're asking for. You need a little bit of probably technology skills to sync it all up together, especially with the automation from Project Online to your Planner and connecting those. But with Power Automate, that can be done. It's just like, that's what we call low code. So it's really some scripting and they connect up. I won't give away all.
Yeah, because the out of the box version is just being able to link the line with the Planner task. And so, but it's not a bi-directional update. And so that's missing out of the box.
Yeah. And that's a core requirement for this project we're doing. It had to have that bi-directional kind of capability. And
it's great as a project manager, because then you put the tasks into the hands of the teams, right? Because as a project manager, you don't want them in your project schedule, your project online schedule, making updates. So this pushes it into their hands so that they could then, and it's not intimidating for them. Because like you said, you just see it in your task list of, I'm supposed to do this and it's due on this date. And that's what I got to do. So I'm kind of excited for the future.
I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised that things keep rolling out. Again, there's going to be things that will be available through just drag and drop them in. And there's some things you might have to just do a little customization and configuration for to make it do exactly what you want. But yeah, that's great.
Do you think Teams is going to be kind of the hub then? Will it be more and more become the hub of where we work? Maybe the one place that you can go to do all your work?
Yeah, and that's what we call the modern workplace. And how it's being rolled out right now, Microsoft has allowed now Teams. It used to just be really the collaboration and the communication tool, and very powerful there. But now they're also allowing it to be a little bit more integrated to the whole like intranet as well. So what we've created for some of our clients as well as ourselves is we created our own Microsoft workplace, modern workplace, and allows us to basically create like a mini app. And inside Teams, you'll see a little icon that, whether with our logo in it, you click on it, it opens up your portal, your modern experience. And what's nice about it lives within Teams. It's not like another tab or something you have to kick out to. It just feels so much more seamless now. And then this is something what Microsoft calls Microsoft Viva. And it really allows you to implement that kind of intranet into your overall Teams environment. So it really becomes your single site experience. We were doing that anyway, but it was sort of like the SharePoint part of it. The portal part was kind of just another tab on the top. There's a bunch of navigation elements on top, which gets kind of cumbersome. This kind of simplifies the interface a little bit more.
Oh.
And then you can click around and dig deep into the projects for Teams and all the other stuff that you do there. But really, we see Teams as the main launching place, and we live in it. We use it as an LMS internally for our tech teams, and we kind of leverages the platform as much as possible. So yeah, you're right. You're right on line with what's happening. That's sort of the plan.
It's an exciting time. I mean, that's my biggest complaint about work is having to open up different, go to Salesforce or go to, this project planner or go to this. It was really great when you can have just this, like, I keep thinking of it like as a desktop that has everything you need, like,
Right.
Yeah. So
it thinks it all up. I mean, we use it for our own purposes. It taps into all once again, the Microsoft ecosystem. So the things that are like common for everyone is there. You want to have the common news of the information, wherever it is, links to certain systems that we've built internally for doing, but it's all, based on the same environment. And then there's things that are very specific to the Microsoft space that are specific to me, audience targeting for myself, using Microsoft Delve. So you'll see the stuff that exists, the documents I'm working on, the most recent, they're right there in your face. All the kind of content you want is one click away. So it really does, from all different viewpoints, whether you're executive, manager, whatever, you're going to have everything pulled together and culled together for you, and it's going to be targeted towards that particular person in their role. So it really has become like the unified one-stop shop.
What do you think will happen to companies who don't pay attention to this trend?
Some people, some companies can just keep going as is. I'm not going to say, it depends on the size of what they're doing. I think if, transformation just for transformation's sake might not be the great fit for every company. Some people are really good in pen and paper, and it's going to be really hard pressed to convince them otherwise if that's their way they just do business. They operate and they make the profits they need to year in and year out. I think they're going to have an issue when it deals with competition if there are people in their space by not being quick enough, and they go back to that customer experience point of view. Because if I can get the same information quicker and easier, maybe a little bit less expensive, because of another company is more advanced with their technology, you'll see the results because it's going to the comparison against it. And I think the change is going to hurt those companies that are so late to the game. Manufacturing is a good example of that. They're real laggards, just like legacy manufacturing companies are just starting to think about digital strategy. And they're having problems implementing because the cost is so enormous compared to, and when business gets reduced because of, pandemics and things like that. So that gets pushed down the road even longer. So I'd see that's going to be a challenge for certain industries specifically. Smaller companies probably can do as they do, but I think, they start thinking about it. Can I be more efficient and make more money by doing less, manual effort? It'd be kind of crazy not to even look at yourselves, and even the smaller companies can take advantage of it.
Yeah, I know we, one of our clients is a recruiting company, and that time to fill is so critical, right? To fill the positions, because if they don't, then they get beat out by competitors. So that automation, whether it's, parsing resumes so that all the data is there, or it's having some sort of resume formatter so that they can get it the way they need it to look, and how quick that process is from when a candidate comes into the door to when they can present it to the client is really critical.
Yeah, what's that timeline there? That's a huge gap, probably. I mean, if you're doing it manually versus someone who can actually use AI and cognitive services and machine learning to speed that along. So like you're scanning it, interpreting it, and moving it along and digitizing everything, or it's already digitized, but just move it to correct formats to wherever it has to. That could all be automated and have something that's taken someone days to be done in minutes. It's crazy. I mean, there's an investment first to build it, but once you have it done, it's just push a button and it keeps running.
So you've used, automation along with AI and machine learning a lot. So it sounds to me like that's highly integrated. So talk to me a little bit about the nuances, but then how all those pieces fit together.
Right. So in terms of that is from a technology stack, the AI, we lean in, we're not writing typically our own models for AI and machine learning. They exist. So we'll piggyback on some of the big boys like Microsoft has Azure and Azure Cognitive Services. However, we have done some projects. We have to write our own models for specific, unique things in the AI space and machine learning and computer vision space. But typically what we look at is, since it's integrated, these solutions are going to want to live in that Microsoft suite. We can tap into Azure and Cognitive Services, a suite of things that are there, and leverage that technology and quickly do some of the things we're talking about, like being able to identify, let's say it's an invoice collection, thousands of invoices can be processed and moved into a reporting system within minutes. Once you train the computer, you can move it in to the cognitive services, train it up, do the machine learning and AI. Then with Power Automate, that's another part of the Microsoft Power Platform, you can quickly move that information to wherever you want it to be. Does it go into a Power BI dashboard or Excel for reporting to another compliance agency or something of that nature? There's different ways you can kind of look at it, but we look at how does it all sync up together. So the AI component, the big brain or whatever is doing the cognitive services, that still has to be trained. You have to do a little bit of work, get it hundreds of documents. Once you get past that initial push and load of like the training, then you're kind of just adding in all the other components that kind of live within your own way of doing business. So it's just another component that can easily be integrated into the overall kind of automation and modernization part of the company.
I think we talked about a little bit, obviously here we talk about avoiding fatality or mortality events within organizations. So, and really what that means to us here is that, you're losing revenue, you're losing people, things that are just going to, so then you ultimately lose market share. So when we talk about, automation and AI and machine learning, obviously we already mentioned that one way you might end up with a corporate mortality event would be if you couldn't move as fast as competitors. Can you think of any other ones that would result in, a company really, losing market share or revenue because they're not innovating in this space?
No, it's a very good question. I think a lot of it could be internal processes too that have to be improved, because we're working on a project right now where it's for a large corporation where they have a massive solution they're deploying to the enterprise, but it's not released yet. So there's thousands of bugs that get processed in Jira and ServiceNow. Currently, that way they process that is manual. So you're looking at 10,000 entries a day that someone has to go and manually effort and do that. So how do you get to scale when you're having to do this manually? So leveraging automation and AI to look at those bugs, move them from the systems, and then report it correctly so they can quickly triage that and then eliminate those bugs as fast as possible. That's how they can get to market fast. So it's almost like product development kind of enhancement, because this is a product release they're doing, and to get to there with all these kind of bugs that are going to have in a project like this, the triage alone takes an enormous amount of time if you can't automate that. So that's why they want to see how they can streamline that process and use automation where possible. So again, that doesn't have there's no pinpoint against a customer in that one. Eventually they'll go to market with this, and it's just going to help them get to market a lot quicker with something that's probably worth massive billions of dollars for the company. So it's a huge project. So that's one area I see. The other areas where I like this whole thing about CPR for a company. It makes me really think about even ourselves. What do we do to make ourselves better? And I'm always trying to figure out ways to do better reporting internally, better innovation, how we can be best serve our customers better. Going back to the customer experience, how do we control that and not just we're not just technology robots, just giving out, automation solutions. It has to be something that has a driving effect for the end client. So it's always kind of like understanding our client's user journey, and then how do we can identify the best ways to enhance that experience. So I think every company we work with has the same kind of problem. They're always trying to find ways to be more efficient and identify areas of it where they can improve customer relations and grow the business. But yeah, companies not doing it. I don't know. I love this whole thing of the CPR. It's a really cool title for a webinar. It just makes you thought. I wasn't even quite sure what it was about at first. And when I was like, what does corporate CPR mean? Then I kind of thought, okay, I get it in general. This is a great topic, and we talk to companies all the time, and it might be a nice thing to say, hey, you know what? This is a lifeline we're giving you in a way, because if you think about it, if you apply it right, it is something that can help accelerate something for a company.
Right. Well, if you need to have, you talked about a lot of, like, if I was going to sum up what you just said, is around the cost of service, right? Like, you've got to reduce the cost of service if you want to stay in business, because if your competitors eventually your margins are going to erode, right? Because they're going to be able to drop their prices or things, and maybe become more lean, et cetera. And you're not going to be able to, or if you do, you're going to have margin erosion.
Right.
So yeah, it's reducing that cost of service, increasing your speed to market and your speed, sounds like those are the reason it's so critical.
Right. And just, these are things we talked about before, the HR onboarding, like getting that, like you mentioned as well, for the recruitment type of company, the same type of idea behind that. It's just, how do we get something quicker out the gate, because it really leads, especially in HR onboarding, typically to the sales organization that are hiring a bunch of salespeople. When they're not onboarded, they're not selling for the company. So that's real money not being delivered because there's a bottlenecks and redundancy in the current state. So it's a very easy argument to make that why wouldn't you want to do something of that nature to improve?
Absolutely. So, well, in closing, tell me, what are kind of your 3 tips then for an organization around AI? Like, what are the 3 takeaways you would want listeners to know and understand about AI?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think, because AI is kind of 2 areas. We call it either weak AI or strong AI. Some of the weaker AI, it doesn't mean it's bad. It's just that it's leveraging things like just the basic out-of-the-box Power Automate, where you can really create a workflow and identify a stream that you want to quickly put an RPA, a bot into the remediate, get rid of it, increase the processes. So I think it starts really, the first tip is really identify that audit assessment of what you're really doing and how you do business. Now, again, the larger the company is going to have departmental different types of issues. Some departments run differently from other departments, the companies we work with in the enterprise, for sure. And even smaller companies sometimes could have that kind of disparate type of way they do their work. But so that honest assessment of where you are is very important. Then the desired state where you want to be. So roadmap out sort of that where you're trying to get to. That's very important, and what it means to the business. And these are once again, it's that company's numbers. They can quickly do that own impact to what it means by identifying, okay, here's a resource waste, here's the cost to those resources. If we eliminate that, here's what we're going to get, and you have that kind of bucket of money. And then that'll allow them hopefully to put the capital budget to it, because there's an expense. And if they go forward and say, we're going to do this, and you have the roadmap with real tangible kind of guidelines in terms of start and end dates, stick to it. That's the thing. It's not something you should start and stop. It's just going to cause more churn and more issues going forward. Also, you're going to have employee engagement issues as well. Because, when you start doing this big digital change into the company, digital transformation, it's usually communicated, it affects outward. So if you start and put a big halt onto it, it really causes some fragmentation and just, employee lack of engagement at that point. So then how do they buy in next time we say we're going to do it now? It's something that I understand things can happen, but it's something that, like with pandemics and things of that nature. But if you got a plan, if you got the budget, stick to it and get there,
Yeah.
As you know, very much in projects.
Yes. Yes, starting and stopping very expensive, very expensive.
And the teams, not just their vendors, but just also internal teams who have stakeholder.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're building this thing, they're excited about it, and then all of a sudden you just stop. It's going to kill enthusiasm going forward when you restart.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, so Andrew, where can people connect with you and learn more about automation and AI and all those pieces of what you do?
Okay, great. Well, again, my name is Andrew Cohen, the CEO of Evoke. We're at evokeenterprise.com is our website address. You can always look at me on LinkedIn and connect there, and I'm very accessible. That's one thing to know. We're not a large company, and so anytime companies work with us, they usually get the opportunity to work with myself and any of our leadership. So feel free, whoever's listening or who's going to listen, reach out through email. I'll even get the email out, acohen@evokeenterprise.com.
Oh, thank you so much, Andrew. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I loved it. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you, listeners. And until next time, stay healthy.
Hey!